So when a private equity firm integrates ESG in the investment process, we're looking at this diagram at the top of the screen, this chevron. So there's a screening phase where they find some investments that they're interested in, or an investment. They do some high level due diligence on it. They should be screening for, red flags. Then they do more significant due diligence. So, some examples of red flags are they might be investing into a factory and there's a really bad health and safety record. There are high incidents. There might be unhappy workers. So if that's the case, there are issues that are fixable and addressable. If you invest into the company and you have influence over the company once it's in your portfolio. And so you might say, okay, this is an opportunity to take over this company and make workers super happy and, reduce the incident rate and pay them better. Or it might be a situation where a red flag is that you're building a power plant on a sacred site, and that's something that's not really fixable, right? So you might not want to do that project at all. And so you have to make an investment decision, and if there are gaps that can be closed and issues that can be measured and managed, then you put together a action plan with targeted timelines to close those gaps. You figure out how much it's going to cost you as a private equity firm. You figure out how much value you're going to add, how long everything's going to take. You might integrate some of the plans into the incentive agreements with the executives who run the company, and maybe put some requirements to close gaps in documentation, legal documentation if you can. And then they're in your portfolio. You monitor, evaluate, you work with the company to improve. There's a bunch of other stuff that you do, as mentioned earlier, when a company's in your portfolio, and then you exit. I should say during the monitoring and evaluation stage, in terms of what is required in an ESG context, there are lots of different frameworks out there that provide you with metrics against which you can measure and manage E, S, or G issues. And so you should have your portfolio companies reporting to you on progress. You should be working with them on setting targets for progress. And then when you sell the company, there's an ongoing debate. There's a lot of issues around, well, what happens if you sell the company to an irresponsible investor and they're the highest bidder for that company? That's maximizing the financial return, but you might have a mission drift, or you might be resulting in negative impacts for those stakeholders. And as Imogen mentioned, there's a strong interpretation of fiduciary duty for private equity firms and their investors of maximizing financial return, regardless of environmental and social impacts. And so, unfortunately, I think there's a lot of pressure for private equity firms to sell to the highest bidder. And this should all be documented in a management system. There should be policies and procedures for each stage of the investment process. The ESG management system, looking at this gray chevron now, it should be evaluated regularly for improvement, and there should be stakeholder engagement in terms of what are the right policies and procedures we're having. Are we doing a good job? Firms should have a mechanism so that stakeholders can get in touch with them, both at the private equity firm level and at the portfolio company level. Investment professionals and ESG professionals should be evaluated based on similar performance metrics. Unfortunately, some of the metrics that are most frequently used to measure private equity performance or basically have this concept that you want to make as much money back as fast as possible. That's called the time value of money. And that is for a number of reasons. It has to do with the investor's opportunity cost and the reinvestment rate. But if you want to make as much money back as fast as possible, and also part of that metric is you want to spend as little as possible early in the investment stage. And if you can imagine, an infrastructure project or something, that's when it's so critical to engage communities. That might require some additional costs and extra time. That can really put a drag on the valuation metric called IRR that investors use to measure investments and that investment professionals are measured against. So, that that really, there's a lot of opportunity to reevaluate how investments are actually measured from a financial performance point of view. There should be senior management endorsement and support of the plan, appropriate resources to implement the plan, transparency and accountability, reporting out to stakeholders on the plan and what can improve. And this last point I already mentioned.